Hi, today we are looking at Action for Hope, Step 2. Step 2 is green your energy. I'm recording this piece just outside our living room. This is not to show you an energy source, but in fact that when we changed the original doors and windows here for new ones, it meant that we could remove an energy source needed to warm our house. The insulation meant that we no longer needed to use a house fire. In the previous video in this series, we considered how to assess your present energy use and its carbon footprint, be it at home or in a church or another building. Now this graph shows the daily electricity use at our house averaged over the previous year for a given month. As you can see, this drifted upwards from spring to summer in 2021, and at the time I wasn't paying much attention to it. But I think the 11-year-old heat pump was losing some efficiency. It needed more electricity, and over the summer there was little change. But we began to see a reduction in consumption set against the 2021 year once autumn came. Now what had we done in that time? Firstly, the old heat pump failed at the end of July, and we decided to replace it with a new one using a company that could provide us with future servicing. And that was in August when it was installed, and it wasn't a cheap option. Next, I checked the radiator valves upstairs and found that several were jammed shut. So probably we had been overheating the house to try to make upstairs comfortable. And that was a zero cost fix, courtesy of some relevant guidance from YouTube videos. A little later, we reduced the set temperature, and that is measured in the utility room. The warm parts of the day were dropped from 20 to 19 degrees. The cold set temperature for overnight was kept at 17 degrees, and it never gets below that on a daily cycle. This was another zero cost fix. And these are the main contributions to a reduction of about 25% in the rolling annual average. Lastly, lately I've been working on offline solar generation to see what difference that might make. So at this time, let's look at relatively low-cost ways to potentially reduce our energy use in a way that for a church is not going to strangle its mission. After all, the easiest way to achieve a carbon zero church or other building is probably to close it. Maintaining and even expanding our mission of our churches is infinitely preferable. Steps we take as churches can help our community assess how to achieve their own energy savings. As with homes, obtaining an Energy Performance Certificate or EPC for a church can help in deciding on the priorities. The assessor will also provide advice for next steps. And the recent Methodist Conference sets targets of an EPC level C as a minimum for Manses. Let's look at insulation. In general, the loss of heat relates to the thermal properties of external surfaces and their areas. The large areas are floors, ceilings and walls, with generally doors and windows being more minor in area. But doors and windows, though, can be sources of leaks and drafts, and also provide cold surfaces which make people feel chilly. And a possible program could be this. Firstly, search out leaks and drafts and look for solutions, perhaps using thermal cameras. Consider secondary or double glazing windows. These are ours and Romsey. Consider better insulation for external doors. And consider the options for wall and ceiling insulation. And finally, consider insulating underlayers for floors. And in my view, care should be taken to plan for ventilation and air purity in our future. I have videos on each of these topics, including CO2 monitors and air purifiers. Coronavirus is very much still around, and anyway, providing healthy airspace seems to be the least that we ought to do for people we invite into our premises. So secondly, let's talk about managing heating. The two main parameters are the set temperature and the timings, and I rarely get the impression that church rooms are uncomfortably warm. But if there are such, steps should be taken to avoid that happening. Also, many of us can properly consider reducing room temperature at our own house. Ideally, the timing of heating programs at churches should be shaped around the occupancy. Perhaps that's best set to provide a welcoming environment for when people are gathering and maintain that for the duration of the events. Chaining the usage of rooms can help reduce the need for preheating. And then there's efficient heating. The vast majority of space heating in the UK is carried out using natural gas, and the cost of burning it, as we well know, has increased dramatically. A gas boiler of 25 years vintage may only be 60% efficient, that's classed as G. An A-rated boiler must be at least 90% efficient, and so it could deliver a reduction in waste of 30%. A reduction of this type would reduce the energy use, carbon footprint and ongoing costs. Inefficiencies can also occur in the delivery of heat to the space. In particular, the thermostatic valves on radiators are very prone to sticking, as we found at home. Matching the radiator performance to room use across the system can result in being able to lower the set temperature for comfortable occupation. A local electrical radiator will also deliver close to 100% of the electrical energy into the room, and the energy can be spread out through fans or by Venturi effect vanes. Presently, the fuel costs are likely to be considerably higher than an efficient gas-powered system, but in the medium term this may well change. Solar and wind-generated energy are now cheaper than the fossil fuel and nuclear-derived alternatives. And then there's lighting. LED lighting has now become the norm and is generally very reliable. And if we take an example of a room with 10 100-watt incandescent bulbs, then an event of 2 hours duration would consume 2 kilowatt hours or units of electricity. Compact fluorescent lamps, CPLs, would reduce the consumption to about 0.4 kilowatt hours and LEDs to 0.2 kilowatt hours. For lighting of large spaces, using LEDs can be a long-term cost reduction as well as reducing energy consumption. For many external lights, the combination of LEDs with integral solar panels and motion detectors can be effective alternatives to mains-powered illumination in some locations. All of these steps can reduce our energy use and should also reduce the energy component of our carbon footprint. In the next video on Step 2 of Action for Hope, we'll look at alternative heating sources such as solar power and heat pumps.